Hey ladies and gents, welcome to Kai's D.I.Y. It's a show where I show you how to make some really cheap props. Whoa.
I'm sorry, do you mind if we do another take of that?
Oh, okay. How do you want to do that? Hey ladies and gents, welcome to Kai's D.I.Ys, and today I'm going to show you how to make this magnificent beast of an arm. A magnificent beast of an arm that you can get only on Injustice 2. How ridiculous do I look right now? Now for this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take from another video who actually inspired me to make this type of arm, but I'm going to add a little twist of my own, making the design from Injustice 2. Now I know I've given Cloud a lot of crap for carrying around a giant sword that especially splits apart into 6 different swords, but this giant hand is so much more ridiculously bulky than his actual right hand of doom, and that's probably why I like it so much. I really can't tell you why. Now I'm going to be taking some inspiration to actually make this arm, which actually comes from Odin Makes. If any of you guys haven't heard of Odin Makes, or at least seen any of his content, please go check him out. He makes amazing stuff. Got that out of the way? Alright, let's get started. Before I go into the tutorial, if you'd like to see updates before my videos are uploaded, please consider following my Facebook page. All you gotta do is go in the description at the bottom of the video, click the link, hit like, and follow. This is the only place I talk about my builds, updates, templates, and more. I also have a Patreon page which you could donate as little as $1 a month to support my channel, help me keep making videos, and even get a chance to win a prop made on this show. Here's what you'll need for this project. A pack of floor mat foam, contact cement, 16 gauge wire, elastic, thin paracord, sanding sponges, duct tape, painter's tape, and electrical tape, a heat gun, a 1.5 of 5-inch ABS pipe, various colors of acrylic paint, plastic dip, X-Acto knives, scissors, and 3 feet of 1/2-inch PEX pipe. Hey guys, it's me from the future. I just want to let you know that is not it for the shopping list. There's much more stuff to add later on. I started with drawing a rough diagram of the hand. I didn't fully follow what I was going to do on paper. I ended up tweaking some of the design later on. To start the hand, I made a template for the back of the hand which benefit my size. I should let you know now, depending on your size, gauge how big you want the hand to be on you. I cut the PEX pipe into 3 different sized pieces for the fingers. 2 8-inch pieces for the index and pinky, an 8.5-inch piece for the middle, and a 6-inch piece for the thumb. I marked every 1.5 inches to know where I'll cut notches into the pipes, drilling a hole into each side of the pipe and cutting from the inside to prevent overcutting. Having wide notches will allow for more flexibility. Then 1 inch from the base and the tip of the pipe, I drilled holes to slide in a piece of 16 gauge wire. You'll see why in a moment. On the back of the pipes, I marked and cut out a rectangular hole above and below each notch. Then taking the elastic, I thread it up the bottom of the tube and out the first hole, weaving it in and out of the pipe, keeping tension the whole time. This way, when the pipe curls like a finger, the tension of the elastic will pull the pipe back straight. I pulled the elastic tight on both the tip and base of the pipe and wrapped it with some electrical tape to hold its tension. I then threaded the paracord through the pipe, starting behind the wire towards the back of the finger, then pulling it over the tip's wire, and back down the front, pulling most out of the bottom. Tying the string from the back into a knot on the wire at the base. By pulling the string, it shortens the length in the pipe, which allows the tube to curl. I had to repeat this for each finger. Using my template for the back of the hand, I made more templates determining the width of each finger. I traced these onto some old floor mat foam I had lying around and cut out a front and back for each finger, then sanded off the texture on the back. I measured the distance to find the center of each finger. Using my Dremel with a sanding drum, I created a channel for each pipe to lay into, then cutting some extra holes into the foam where each notch in the pipe is, allowing for less tension in the foam to help the finger bend. I set the pipes into the channels of each foam fingers and used contact cement to glue around the pipe, not gluing the pipe inside. Next, I traced the back of the hand template onto the foam mat I'm going to use for the rest of this arm and cut it out. I cut a small strip of foam and marked the distance between each finger and cut a channel for them to lay into, and extra pieces of foam above the channels to extend the depth. I cut notches in front of the fingers and the foam base that will hold the fingers in place. Then I rounded the edges of each finger, then glued each finger into the base, making sure to glue in the pipe as well. Then glued the fingers to the inside of the back of the hand. After that, I glued an extra piece of foam underneath to help add support and make sure the pipes do not pop out of the foam fingers. Later on, I cut some space for the string to pull through and not snag on the bottom reinforcement. I measured the circumference of the ABS pipe and made a ring out of a strip of foam, which will be the start of the wrist, using a heat gun to curl the back of the hand and gluing the ring to that. I added a couple strips of foam to connect the thumb to the ring. As of right now, I should also tell you that you should be sanding the texture off the back of the foam to help glue stick better. I then started on my arm. I measured the thickest part of my arm where I wanted the ABS pipe to stop, then cut out more strips of foam, one to wrap around my arm and another to go over the first ring to reinforce it and fit snugly into the pipe. I later tried to sand down the inside of the ring because it fit too snug, which made my arm feel cold, which is a sign of blood circulation being cut off. Basically, very bad idea if things are too tight. I ended up sanding more than I needed, and the arm connection became loose, so I added another piece of foam later, custom fit to the shape of my arm. Here's the basic idea of how the arm is going to work. My arm is going into the ABS pipe and into the hand. My hand and wrist will control the pivoting motion of the Hellboy hand. I marked where my hand was inside the ABS pipe, and then cut it down. I added a ring inside of the bottom of the hand, which will act as the wrist, and another ring to the inside of the ABS pipe. This will stop the wrist from going too far into the arm. Then I made another ring for the inside of the hand for a snug connection on my hand. Then added more pieces of foam for a better fit and glued it in place, adding more reinforcement on the top of the rings. I added another strip of foam inside the back of the hand to reinforce it. I then had the super clever idea to make some key rings out of the 16 gauge wire, which did not work. After testing on the strings, it dug into my fingers and warped with little pressure. So I went around and did a little searching and bought a couple of these little welded metal rings. The benefit of having these instead of those key rings is that these are already welded together and they're not going to come apart, and they hold to the tension a lot better. I tied the new rings to the strings and tested the best length to tie each finger. Unfortunately, I placed my thumb in an awkward position and tried multiple times to move my thumb to move Hellboy's thumb, and it didn't move. So no working thumb. As I was testing the functionality of the fingers, the hand wasn't as sturdy as I thought it was going to be, so I added some pieces of wood to really reinforce it, which helped a ton. More testing, then added a piece of 5mm craft foam over the wood to protect my hand, as it was digging into my hand. And even more 5mm craft foam over the gaps to prevent the rings from getting stuck. I cut the string shorter and used a lighter to seal the ends. I then glued on the palm of the hand and glued another piece around the thumb to make the heel. Then cleaned up the edges where I attached the palm with my Dremel. I added a detail panel near the thumb. I used epoxy to attach the rings where my arm will go in. Now to design the arm. I measured the circumference of the ABS pipe and cut out a sheet of foam to wrap around the pipe. Remember to sand off the texture. Also, sanding the surface of the ABS pipe helps the contact cement stick better. I trimmed off a little excess on one end to make each end stick out just a little from the pipe. I then added another sheet to go on top of that, about 1/4 inch from the top. The sheet I had was too small to reach the bottom of the arm, so I added a ring toward the bottom of the arm. I measured how much of this part of the arm I wanted to expose while the top and bottom get covered with more foam. I again measured the circumference and made a template that I traced onto the floor mat foam, cut it out, and glued it into place. It didn't fully wrap around the arm, so I had to add some foam to fill in the gap. The bottom piece was done the same way, but I glued 2 layers of foam together, sanded it, then glued it on. Then filled in the gap. I glued another ring to the inside of the arm to make it look thicker, then trimmed the excess. Next, I took another template I made out of poster board, which is a 2.5 inch circle, and traced it 9 times on a piece of foam. Then I cut them out a little bigger, then sanded the edges down. I traced the template over where I should put them, and started to draw on where the cracks are from the photos I got from the game. I did the same to the hand. To make the giant horns, I cut out multiple sheets of foam and a sheet of 5mm craft foam. I glued a stack of 9 EVA and 1 5mm foam sheets, then used my bandsaw to cut it into a tube. The tips of the horns are a little offset, so I wasn't able to mark the center point, so I pretty much just sculpted the tube into a horn with a bandsaw and belt sander. with the point of the horn slightly moved upward. It's kinda hard to explain, but you can easily see it. I made the mistake of cutting the horns the exact size of the knuckle base. To fix that, I added a strip of 2mm craft foam around the disc that will be my base. I rounded the edges, then glued the horns to the base. After gluing the horns to the back of the hand and the discs to the arm, I cut 4 2-inch strips of foam and glued them together, then cut it on my bandsaw on a 45-degree angle, cutting 2 odd angles at the base and the top of the strip, then cut an angle off the end and rounding it. I then glued the strip on the back of the hand a little above the edge. For the knuckle at the base of the thumb, I cut out a smaller 2-inch disc and glued it on. Then comes the long process of using a bunch of engraving tips and carving in the cracks. Using a ball tip to pockmark the surface. Sanding all the edges to round them out. I also used the very edge of the sanding drum to carve the segments into the fingers, but be very careful to not carve too deep and expose the channel of the fingers. After all that's done, I sealed the surfaces with my heat gun. I used spackle on the horns to cover all the obvious lines. Time for paint. I covered the fingers and the thumb with painter's tape and newspaper and sprayed the entire arm with Plastidip. When that dried, I uncovered the fingers and painted on 3 layers of Mod Podge. I then mixed red, a little brown, and a little bit of black acrylic paint, then used the torn edge of polyfoam to paint the hand and arm. I made sure to get into every crack and corner with the red paint. I mixed a little pink into the paint to make some highlights and scrapes. I then made a darker color to paint the segments in the fingers and cracks, as well as kinda dry brushing over most of the light areas. Then I mixed some light and dark yellow with some orange to paint the fluorescent horns. I used painter's tape to cover over the red areas and keep them red and sponged on the yellow. I did about 3 layers of this. Then by taking just the orange paint I had, I dry brushed around the base of the horns and the ones on the arms to really make them pop. I peeled off the tape and touched up around the base of the horns. Then I let it dry. After all that, you just need to slide your arm in, grasp the rings, and you're good to go. A custom fit, Nazi smashing, right hand of doom. There's your very own giant right hand of doom. Now with the final design, and if I were to remake this, there are a bit of tweaks that I would actually make to make it look a little bit better. For one thing, I was going to have these little horns actually glow. I actually experimented around with tonic water, and tonic water is actually fluorescent if you put it under black light. I mixed some tonic water with some paint and tried painting on a piece of foam, but it did not glow. So I decided to just use some bright colors instead, and that actually still makes it pop somewhat. And I could have made these from a different material, like some acrylic, and actually put some lights in, but I wasn't going to get that fancy. Another thing is, if I would have known that the thumb was going to be placed as awkward as it was, and I wasn't going to be able to move it, I wouldn't have put so much time to actually make it puppeteer. Maybe if I moved it just a little bit more up, then I would actually be able to have some space to move my thumb. And another thing is with the pinky, I can barely move the pinky. Something I should have done was shorten the length of the string from the pinky finger, and that way I could bend it a little bit better. But other than that, I'm actually very happy with how this turned out. I got some nice wrist movement. I could even move up and down if I wanted to. And I make these nice little gestures. Okay, that's not PG. If you like this video, be sure to click like at the bottom of the video, and as well as subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Also be sure to go to the comments down below, tell me what you thought about my arm, and tell me if you would make any kind of other giant bulky puppeteered arm. But as of right now, I'm gonna kick back and chew my favorite candy bar. Okay, I am fully aware that Hellboy likes Baby Ruth. I couldn't find any for this video, so I had to do with Snickers. Have you clicked on any of the other videos yet?